Hello, listeners. This is the Prose and Cons Precipice Fiction podcast. It's just me at the moment, Ali Burnham, and we're doing something a little bit different. You may have heard Matan's episode a few weeks back, but we're doing essentially reruns, clip shows, while we take a little bit of a season break over the holiday break. Please forgive us for being in need of a holiday, but even writers are only human. So what we've done, which I think is a pretty cool thing, is we're going back and we're picking our favourite episodes that we've recorded over these, year and a half, 2 years, I'm not sure how long it's been. And we're recommending our favourite episodes. So any new listeners out there can get up to speed. I thought this was quite a task to choose just one, because there's quite a few I have genuinely really loved hosting and being a part of. Ones I've hosted that I've loved was the Screenwriting What Not to Do Book of Boba Fett. I recommend you go and check that one out. All Storytelling is Wrestling, I'm particularly passionate about. And also my creativity episode I really enjoyed doing, and I love harping on about that whenever I can. Ones I've been a part of that I haven't hosted was Phoenix's Food in Literature episode. That one's particularly fun because I am convinced we were all a little bit tipsy when we recorded that one. So if nothing else, it's entertaining. Check it out. And I learned a lot from James's genre deep dive into horror episode. But that's a slew of recommendations. The one I have actually chosen and finally landed on to be the one I wanted to recommend was the House of the Dragon extravaganza discussion episode. Now, this one was recorded just after the pilot had dropped. So going back in time, and with the incredible ability of hindsight, all of you can now listen to it having seen the whole first season. But this was us raw water cooler talking about the first episode after it had dropped. And we're a fun mix because a couple of us are super fans. We're across George R. R. Martin's Fire and Blood work, while others are just like, yeah, dragons, it's a TV show, let's talk about it. So it's a good, healthy mix. The reason I've picked it is I think there's all five, not all six of us, I can't remember, but there's a good chunk of the Precipice present for this episode. Lots of opinions as we react to the episode we've just seen. And you probably get me at one of my most super fan-y kind of modes. It's just me with a bunch of people struggling to stop me from talking because of how much I love this property, how much knowledge I have on it, and how much I just want to get my opinions out. So that's the joy of this episode. If you want to take a dive into that, and already talking about it, a part of me, when season 2 comes out, wants to replicate this. So if you want another one of these episodes, let us know, but please enjoy this one.
Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this special edition bonus episode of the Prose and Cons podcast. I am your host for today's episode. I'm Ali. Joining us today, we have Matan.
Hey.
We have Phoenix.
Hello.
We have Patty.
Ahoy, hoy.
And we have Alex.
Hiya.
Almost a full house.
Only James is missing.
Only James has to work on a Tuesday. The reason this is a special bonus episode is because House of the Dragon episode 1 dropped, and if you've been a long time listener, you've probably heard us mention Game of Thrones and Song of Ice and Fire quite regularly as just something we're well versed in, something we are fans of. So when this was dropping, it seemed an excellent opportunity for us to fangirl about it and or tear it apart. That's what this reaction episode is for. We've tried very hard not to discuss it amongst ourselves until we're ready to dive into it. So rather than doing our usual round the table thing about what we've been watching this week, I'm just going to assume we've all watched the episode as our viewing. Though I did, Alex pulled an excellent face. Basically, my first question that I had for everyone was, tell us a little bit about what your personal relationship is to A Song of Ice and Fire, what your relationship is to the TV show, and kind of the level of hype and knowledge you've come into the House of the Dragon premiere at. So I'm going to throw it to you, Matan, for that.
So when George Martin was young, he went to Israel, and I'm basically his bastard son. So that's the reveal. But it's
I was buying that for
the
about
rest
3
of the
seconds.
podcast. It's not going to have any effect on the rest of the podcast. I just put it there, and that's it. Jokes aside, man, I love Song of Ice and Fire. I loved Game of Thrones, the show. I'm one of the people that first watched the first season of Game of Thrones and thought, man, I should go and pick up these books. So that was a great experience. But Game of Thrones aside, I also really enjoyed Fire and Blood, the book I'm guessing House of the Dragon is based upon. Yeah, I love it. I enjoy it. I had my thoughts about the final seasons of Game of Thrones, but as a whole, it's a sweet and blessed memory. The whole thing as a whole.
Was it too tainted for you?
No, because, I know you know as well as anyone that making movies and TV shows is such difficult work. So I don't get upset when someone doesn't do well. I get disappointed, but I appreciate what was done well, which is a lot. And it was a miss.
Good attitude.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. People got so outraged by the last episode, and it's not fair. They did the best they could, obviously.
Yeah, I mean,
if you're outraged and you're listening, then maybe
we respect your outrage, and we
do. We
had feelings.
You can add us. We'll take the free marketing.
There we go.
Patty, what's your relationship with the books and original series?
I started watching Game of Thrones. I had a friend who was like, you have to watch this. You must watch this. And I did, and it was intriguing. I'd never seen a big budget fantasy thing before, and I'm a massive fantasy fan. And it just kept getting better and better. Until, second to last season, there was nothing not to like. Every week, it was the highlight of my week. It was the highlight of my year whenever it came out. And also, everybody was watching it. I feel because I never watched the Olympics or anything like that. So I feel for the first time, I'm in connection with everybody else in the Western world, not just the world who's watching this. It was huge. I have such fond memories of the show and everything around it. It was absolutely fantastic.
That's so wholesome. I love this.
It gave me wholesome feelings. It was just, Game of Thrones was the shit.
React to the episode.
Phoenix, what's your relationship with the books and or show?
So I unfortunately did not read the books, but my partner did. So that doesn't really count for much here, but just a fun fact, she read the books. But no, I got started on the show. It was something one of my friends handed me. He handed me the first 3 seasons on a flash drive, a legal flash drive. And
should we be admitting to this?
It's an important part of Game of Thrones culture, I think, especially in Australia, is the relationship to pirating and how you actually get a hold of this material to consume
no one has HBO. Who has Foxtel?
That's right. In our defense, it's very hard to
for
get
this last episode. I watched it on HBO Max. There you go. But I one day I was just like, all right, let's see what I have on this flash drive. Adventure Time. I know he gave me Game of Thrones, so I was I finally popped it on, and I was like, oh my God, shoot, this is I felt so at home immediately. I was like, I'm gonna fall so deep into this show, and I'm so here for it. I have 3 seasons right here. Let's go. I watched 2 episodes, and then I talked to my girlfriend at the time, and she was like, you started it without me? And I'm like, oh, I guess I'm waiting to watch the rest of the episodes. But I loved the show very, very much, all the way up until season 6. I loved season 6. the end of season 6, I was like, holy crap! Like the whole battle with Jon Snow and that whole one shot through my heart was like going.
That was stunning.
And then once
that was so good.
Yeah. And then once I saw like the first episode of season 7, I was like, they lost it. Okay. And I knew immediately. I was like, all right, it's done. Season 6 was where I liked it, and I'm not really a fan. I see where this is going, and I'm not a fan anymore. And I was okay with that. But and then so going into this new series, I was a little bit skeptical. I had my bar low.
Mm-hmm. And Alex, what's your relationship to the material?
Yes. So I had a friend in high school who was a theater nerd. He was very, very excited about Game of Thrones, and it came out, and I think he was raving about it for a while. At some point, I caught on to it. And full disclosure here, like of all the persons in the podcast, I probably have the least tie with epic fantasy. It's just not really my yin. I do like it. I'm conversant with it, but it's not my main go-to thing. So, but I remember watching the first season of Game of Thrones and being like, "Holy fucking shit, amazing!" Like there's the political intrigue, and there's the romance, and there's like the So I was just I was blown away. I have a weird relationship with TV shows in which I'll watch a season, really enjoy it, and then not watch another one for like 3 years. So I actually only ever got up to about the 4th season, I think, which in retrospect I'm kind of glad about, because it
Good
sounds
place
like
to start.
You guys seen that meme of like Game of Thrones as a horse, like drawn as a horse?
Yes.
And the first half of it is like beautifully drawn, and like last bit's just a little stick in it. I stopped just at the point where it stopped being really well drawn. So I don't know. But I've also listened to audiobook to the first actual book. So I am also conversant with that, and I like that a lot. I haven't gone any further through it. I fully intend to, but so that's kind of my relationship to it.
Awesome. And I'll dive into. There was a reason I put my hand up to host, and why I nearly threw down when Patty suggested I don't host today.
I have 2 pages of notes. I just love that comment. I think it's so cute.
The notes sold it.
I've been working on my notes to get my thoughts down. Basically, my love affair with Game of Thrones started in film school. So it was season 1 came out, and it was the thing. I was actually a little bit slow getting to it, because again, in Australia, if you didn't have Foxtel, you got to find other creative ways to watch it. And the moment I did start watching Game of Thrones, I'm like, this is the story I've been waiting my entire life for. Immediately then, after season 1, I needed to devour the entire book series, which I did between the gap of season 1 and season 2. So in that gap, I've read all the books, and it was kind of before I transitioned to audiobooks as the way I consume most of my material these days. So I have this genuine love affair with reading the physical material and like all the dog-eared, torn up pages of the books, like, because these books had to travel everywhere with me in their tomes. And so
Ali, do you dog-ear pages when you see something really cool in like the writing or the plot or something you want to come back to?
Yeah. So they've just been lovingly
Matan, you're shaking your head.
I am, because
you're one of them.
If you love the book, you'll remember the page number, right?
Yeah. I'm in Matan's camp here for
like
sure.
40 dog ears. I'm not remember that.
So my relationship with Patrick Rothfuss' Name of the Wind, I have 2 sets. I have the really pristine, pretty books I have not done that to, and then I have the ones that I've read to death and dog-eared the crap out of. So I actually have 2 different copies of
I
what I
put
did
notes
to
on
that.
I
wanted to underline
on Rothfuss.
shit.
You can underline.
It's that good.
It's okay.
It's that good.
It's a book that makes you want to underline stuff. So anyway, I do have a very distinct memory of experiencing the Red Wedding in book form first. And it was like 1 a.m. in the morning where I'm just reading it. And then I'm like, I'm never going to sleep again. And my poor housemate was still awake playing like the Wii U or something. Wii, depending on what generation of console we're at, playing the Wii. And I've come out at 1 a.m. being like, I've had a moment. and I'm not going to be able to explain it to you because it's spoilers, but I'm just trying to talk around what the Red Wedding has done to me emotionally and just unloading to him at like 1 a.m. in the morning on a uni night. And then I had to, 3 years later, the rest of the world had that moment.
Yeah.
And I got to be one of the smug assholes that's like, oh, the Red Wedding's coming up.
That was my brother. I was watching the Red Wedding with my brother, and the asshole was just staring at me the whole episode, and I have no idea what the hell he wants from me. Like,
Yep.
is there something in my teeth? Like, why is he looking at me so hard? And I started to get this creepy feeling that something bad's coming, because he did the same when Ned Stark lost his head. But I had no idea like how bad it was going to be.
But then I'm watching it being like adaptation choices. They've made some choices. And I love the intellectual exercise of, especially I'll say the first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones. I adore as some of the best television ever made. Just a very solid, fantastic adaptation with some very intelligent adaptation choices. And when they have made choices, you can usually you can follow the chain of thought as to how they've come to that decision. They've decided to do things differently. And I'm like, I can follow the logic and be like, I understand why you've made that creative decision. That's cool. And engaging with that exercise. After about kind of season 5 onwards, I started to see the red flags that they were doing things a little bit different. And I could no longer follow the logic as to why they were making those adaptive
Because
choices.
Disney.
Was it Disney's fault yet?
Well, yeah, the writers all went over to Disney. They were like,
Oh,
"Is that
they
true?"
wanted
So we can go to Disney.
I've heard
Star
that a
Wars.
lot, but I don't know. Is that actually
went to
true,
work
though,
on
or is
Star
that just
Wars.
something that everybody's
I think
saying?
they were sick of it by then. They wanted a new job. They wanted to rush things, and then they didn't get the job
Again,
in the end
though,
because
is that
they did
we
such
actually,
a terrible
do we
job.
actually know that, or is that just what everyone says about
It's very
what
popular
happens?
hearsay, and
It is popular hearsay.
I'm yet to hear a better reason as to
Don't let the truth
why
get in the
they
story.
screwed
Okay.
the pooch so badly. Anyway, so it was one of these horrible slow breakups, but like it was a train wreck I couldn't look away from. So like my housemates had to put up with me being like, we're all sitting down to watch this as I watch it angrily, was my relationship with like the last 2 seasons or so. I had to consume it all, but I'll do it with my arms folded, being like, what a terrible writing choice. So that was essentially my relationship with it. But I've cosplayed Daenerys. I was in deep, man. I'm a deep, deep fan. And I enjoy it as the cultural phenomenon that it was. And it is exciting that we're getting House of the Dragon now, because as you were saying, Patty, we get to engage with this water cooler talk event television that only comes around every so often in a lifetime. And I find that really cool.
Can I just say, I'm really glad that it's, look, I don't know if it's being released differently on HBO Max, but I'm really glad that I went to binge and I was like, season 1, episode 1. Oh, that's all there is. I'm so happy with that. I love that form of consuming content. I love the forced limitation of like, no, you only get one. You only get one this week and you have to wait for the next week. I love that. I don't know
and
why.
we're all going to be watching it at the same time. Like the world is going to be watching it at the same time.
It's just it's
true.
Brilliant marketing choice too. Anyway.
So it's going to be an exciting ride. I was quietly optimistic for House of the Dragon. One, because it's a different creative team behind it. And they're living in the shadow of what happened to the end of the television show. So it's like you've got one job. And the one job's not to fuck it up. So I'm surely that creative pressure is there on the team to do well. And they know we're already seeing the stats come out that like this is like the most streamed episode, like a debut ever. Like it's already smashing records. The amount of people who did sit down to watch this thing.
I did not know that.
Is incredible. And it's just going to get. I'm very excited for whatever the next 10 weeks holds. Just in terms of like, if it is going to be another cultural phenomenon that shapes how people engage with streaming again, because streaming's in a weird place. Is streaming dying? ? What's the media doing? And then House of the Dragon's here to, shake up some stats. So, what is Fire and Blood is where I wanted to start. I won't spend too much time on it because I know only Matan can really talk to this. So Fire and Blood was the book George R. R. Martin released when he should have been finishing the series. Basically, it's a fantastic prequel, I guess, is the loose word we're going to use. But it is the history of the Targaryen family. But the fun thing about Fire and Blood is that it's not written narratively. It is written as like a maester in current time.
I have a really good metaphor for that. Do you know how like really popular fictional worlds have like a wiki, like Harry Potter wiki? So George basically wrote his own wiki.
Of George R. R. Martin.
He wrote basically, the Silmarillion. Not even the Silmarillion in my eyes. It's not even that because the Silmarillion
it's got
has
in-world characters have written this book.
Yeah. And like half the time he doesn't know what happened. He's like, maybe this happened, maybe that happened. You're like,
oh, that's
what do you
fun.
mean? What happened?
This story
could have been anything. This guy said they just had an orgy, you know? Okay.
Yes. So basically we have this, I'm just going to say modern day Game of Thrones maester, works at Old Town, and he's collecting all these primary and secondary sources about the Targaryen family, and this is him as a historian trying to work out what happened. So it's not a definitive voice about who these characters are and what they did, because he's like, there's a jester named Mushroom who would write down all his stories about how there was nothing but orgies, and it's like, but we got to take what Mushroom wrote down with a grain of salt. There were perhaps not that many orgies.
Yeah. George R. R. Martin knows probably a few.
Probably a couple of orgies.
Yeah.
So as a reader, you kind of get to be like, well, which version do I believe? You get to engage with it the same way, being like, did that happen or did that happen? So as an adaptation choice, going to Fire and Blood and focusing in on the Dance of Dragons section, which is, it's just a section of Fire and Blood, as written material, as a show we're about to watch, these television writers have had to have made a definitive choice about what happens, which I'm kind of interested in as a creative and intellectual exercise, because Fire and Blood, George R. R. Martin gets to get away with being like, maybe this happened, maybe that happened, have some fun.
I think he does a really good job, because there are a few main sources. In Fire and Blood, he does a good job of each time making one of them, and usually a different one, look like the most reliable. There's not one that is consistently the one that is really like, oh yeah, that's the guy who knows what happened.
Yeah.
And each time it tells you, so this guy wasn't there, but he said this.
Yeah.
And if maybe you usually believe one of them, and suddenly it gives you like something that doesn't feel right, it kind of keeps you on your toes, because not one of them is always lying. Even Mushroom with his crazy orgy stories, you got to think to yourself that at least half the time he's not that far from the truth, right?
Right.
Orgies happen.
No, that George R. R. Martin is
about to buy this book.
He's a really big history fan, right? Like even the Red Wedding is based on, I think, like something that happened between two Scottish clans. Isn't like a lot of Game of Thrones based on War of the Roses?
Yes.
Like if he's taking a lot of inspiration from history, and history, like you alluded to, Alex, is full of like, no one knows. This person's account says this person's account says this. Like it might not even be that Mushroom is lying. Like just Mushroom remembers the orgies because that's what Mushroom did.
By the way, Mushroom is a dwarf who is also the court jester, and allegedly has participated in some of the. I'm not sure.
Yes, they have to give him
According to Mushroom.
According to Mushroom. Yeah, no, I think
Mushroom, of course.
we have details about like the length of Mushroom's cock and things like this. So that's all in there because it's
the biggest in Dragonstone or something.
I mean, it sounds to me like it's kind of perfect in terms of the medium, because the nature of translating a book to a TV series, as Ali well knows, is that you have to change things for the nature of the medium. So this is basically, it would be sort of akin to them having all these options, and because I know George R. R. Martin is a creator. I'm not sure what. I literally Googled it and just looked at it and was like, yeah, he created, he's part of it. So I'm like, right, fine, it's got his stamp of approval. So he is in on it somehow. I don't know to what extent he's writing it, but essentially the writers have been given this palette. It sounds like. Yeah. And then they're like, okay, you get to pick and choose, which is, as I said, the nature of screenwriting anyway. So I guess you just get to pick the most fun option, which is kind of a great thing, really. So
Yes,
Mm.
I'm looking forward to it. For example, something I can think of that's going to come up. So again, I'm going to talk around spoilers and not actually give spoilers, but Christian Cole is introduced episode 1. Basically, he's the knight from Dawn who unseats Daemon Targaryen. And it's a little bit of an upset because it's Daemon Targaryen. He's this prestigious warlord at this point. And he gets unhorsed during the joust. So everyone's like,
yes.
oh, who's this knight? Christian Cole, he's going to play a really important role in what's going to come up. We don't know, and by we, I mean like people who have read the book, we don't know why a rift forms between him and Rhaenyra, sorry. I'm going to confuse those two characters. Rhaenyra, the protagonist, the princess, named Heir at the end of episode 1. A rift forms between them, and Fire and Blood never tells us why. It's like all these people from the era don't know why a rift between them forms. So as a show watcher, I'm now interested to watch the upcoming episodes and be like, how are the writers going to choose what the rift is? How are they going to what are they going to land on? Why do they have a falling out? So just small decisions like that. It's going to be very cool to watch that play out on screen.
I really wish that they lent, hearing you and Matan talk about it, I really wish that I've seen one episode, so grain of salt, because who knows, maybe I'll like what they do. But I really like the idea of including that meta aspect of some person trying to collect stories of what happened. And I really wish they kind of integrated some, because that would have been a brave sort of television choice.
See, I don't know that they wanted to go for brave. Like we mentioned before that they've got so much creatively writing on this.
Yeah.
If they did a brave choice and it didn't quite work, like I think people would coming for them with torches and pitchforks. Like I don't know that the fan base would have.
Cultural moment.
But I feel like taking that like meta layer of humor almost diffuses the tension of like you need to get it perfect, and we're expecting a fierce, serious fantasy to kind of give it this jovial like blah blah blah. Who knows? Like you could play allow with that. That gives a lot of wiggle room and kind of subverts the audience a little bit.
Potentially.
I gotta be honest. As someone who read the book, I'm really happy that it isn't that way, because I feel like that's what I'm missing. I am missing the true version, and I wouldn't want to watch another version when another person isn't sure what happened. Do you know what I mean?
You couldn't really do that for TV anyway. I mean, you could, but it'd be very experimental.
It'd be Rashomon.
I was thinking Rashomon, yes.
Yeah. My small aside was just going to be about Mushroom again, in that George likes the jesters to be the ultimate voice of wisdom, weirdly enough.
He does.
So it's like when everyone else has a political agenda about what they write down, it's like the true prophecy or the truth of the matter will ultimately come out of the jester.
It reminds me of Tom Bombadil in Tolkien, right? Bombadil was like, ha hoo hee hoo hoo, but he's also like the most powerful being in the universe. Yeah, the divine fool archetype.
It's a Shakespearean trope.
I think it's older, but yeah. It's...
And being like, hey, some shit's going to go down, but you won't listen to me because I'm...
it's the tarot card fool as well. It's an archetype we are used to, and George does love that archetype. So in terms of steering this reaction episode, I basically wanted to go from the top. So as an adaptative choice, I'm very interested in being like, when are they going to open and close the Dance of Dragons? Because Fire and Blood, it just runs together from this person had this kid to this kid, all the way down the dynasty. So it's tricky to be like, well, when do you launch the Dance of Dragons, and when do you actually close it off? Because kind of, I guess, minor spoilers, it's not going to be a happy ending. We're watching Game of Thrones. We are ultimately watching a tragedy. So where exactly are you going to find kind of these end beats? Something I find the book does really well is, even if this person ultimately has kind of an unsatisfying end, you keep reading because you want to be like, well, does their child stick around to like fuck shit up and avenge them? Like that's why we're watching the Starks, right? It's like, oh, well, this happened to Ned, but we want to see what the kids are going to do. And that's what draws you through again and again and again. It's what George does really well. So as an opening, basically what happens to Rhaenys, the queen that never was, does a really good job in my opinion, of kind of kicking off what the whole political climate is and what the thematic discussion of the Dance of Dragons is that a woman cannot sit on the Iron Throne. So I did want to throw that open to you, how what you guys thought of the opening and kind of setting that up as the big opening question.
This was actually
so many opinions at once.
We need a system for this.
Patty, go.
Oh, okay, all right. Oh God, I don't remember what my point was anymore. Phoenix, you go. Shit.
Oh, well, this was actually one of my big questions because I felt like I was really curious for the people that read the book, and I am going to read the book now. I might go out and buy it tomorrow. I really wanted to see if they had the same tone of like, because to me it felt like the show went really hard into the here women aren't given a free go, and we're very clearly not supporting this. And to me, it felt like the TV directors trying to just appease audiences because it's a very easy way to get people on your side by.
I felt that.
Obviously, it's the political stream that all of us are here for. So it's like we'll also show this because it's an easy plot to one would assume and hope, but it's an easy plot to win people over on. So I was wondering if that was just the TV directors or if that was in the book as well and actually baked into the plot.
Yep.
Like that.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like it kind of is.
No, I think it does. So we know George can write really complex and great female characters. And so Dance of Dragons happens towards the back end of Flood and Fire. So we get an excellent showing of fantastic female characters for the start across the whole dynasty, but just none. They've all been the queens. They've all been the consort. They've all been around. That's a weird way to phrase it. Around the main kind of seat of power, I guess. And so Dance of Dragons is where that finally culminates, I feel like, finally challenging that question. So it feels earned. It feels earned that Dance of Dragons is the crux of like, well, due to the succession, and inbred Targaryens struggling to have babies. It's hard when you're that inbred. We've only got female heirs. Can we put a woman on the throne? And kind of the war that's got to follow from this. Did you feel the same way, Matan, that this question and theme does feel earned by the time we get to Dance of Dragons?
I gotta be honest, I do feel it is. I feel like they touch it really well. And I'm just gonna pretend for a second that I just watched the episode. And in that terms, as an opening scene, I thought it was great because it set the stakes. It introduced the key players, at least a lot of them, not all of them. And I really like the little touches in their expressions, the settings. Like I couldn't actually say this is the bad guy, this is the good guy. I saw a family. I saw winners and losers. Even one of my favorite things is watching Viserys react to being named king. His reaction
when he
is
knows
like
he's the lesser as well.
Yeah, and it's like a man who won a trial. It's not a man who won a kingdom. And I just loved it because it felt so real. And it paints the character. And the other side, you got Corlys Velaryon and his wife, the queen that never was. And their reaction is also human. And I thought that was a good way to start because they even said so. I think the writer, this is a family drama. And it does feel almost like a bunch of kids sitting in a lawyer talking about inheritance. Who's going to get the flat, right? Yeah. And like, okay, so your sister-in-law looks at you like, yeah, okay, you got the flat. Let's move on with our lives. And that's touch I really liked about the opening scene.
I see what you're saying, Phoenix, though, that without this context, that this is kind of the culmination of this thematic, that it might feel like pandering to a modern audience, that it's like, cool, this whole plot is going to be just about, women in power. I can appreciate that, how you can, coming in cold, you might feel that.
It's nice to hear that that's not exactly what's going on, and it sounds like it's deeper laced in with the plot than what I had initially thought.
I felt like it was.
That's very cool.
Can I jump in there just on a slightly related issue? I might be jumping ahead a little bit, but something I saw recently on TikTok, where, as you guys know, I've been spending a lot of time, is someone brought up the idea that there's not a lot of women in sort of high fantasy, epic fantasy these days that are portrayed as I'm trying to think of how to phrase it. Like, not battle ready, let's say. Like, there are very few female protagonists I can think of that are like not Joan of Arc sort of vibes. Like, one that I can think of is actually Sansa Stark, which I think has done really well, and her journey has done very well. But one thing I noticed about the was it Rhaenys? I'm struggling.
The protagonist, the
young one.
Protagonist, yeah.
Rhaenyra.
Yeah. Like, one thing I did click on was the mum being like, our battlefield is the bedroom, is the marital bed, and she's like, but I want to be a warrior, and I was kind of like, that's a pretty easy hook to bite on, you know, like
an easy dichotomy.
It felt like, look, I don't know where that's going to go, but it did feel pretty like, okay, all right, I felt like we
know this story
before. Now that might be taken in an interesting direction, but just pertaining to the discussion that we were just having there, it did feel like an easy hook to bite on there. Did anyone else feel that at all? Or?
I did. I kept comparing it to, in my mind, I actually, and this isn't like fully fair, but I guess, I don't know, I kept comparing it to Game of Thrones episode 1, just less from like a story comparison and more from like I guess a direction, a way to take things, a way to set a stage, a way to set a story. So it was like, to me, it's like, if you look at this new show and kind of look at it as though you're reading a sacred text, where you're kind of where the premise is, all right, let's say everything here is true and needs to be taken as truth, then you can find reason within it, and you can find, like, you can agree with things, and that's kind of the sacred text practice, is like, if you look at it and you just assume that it's all intentional, then it's like, okay, I can find why it works, then that's fine. But if you look at it from a pure, like, the directors could have made anything, was it a good choice? And obviously they're bound because it's based off of a book, so they can't do anything. But to me, it felt a little like I was being explained to a lot, and that was that was something that turned me off. There was a lot of talking. There was a lot of talking, and that was a red flag for me.
See,
yeah, Patty.
Yeah, I didn't feel the pandering sense, and I get why you could say that, and I suppose I get why that might be a reaction. But to me, it's such an interesting moment in history where there isn't a male heir. There is a perfectly acceptable female heir. The female heir is actually the better option. And I see that as like a totally believable point of tension. It definitely, I mean, I don't have any historical examples, but it absolutely would have happened in history where you've got a faction saying like, but she would be a much better ruler than this guy, and she's got a better claim. And then there would be another faction saying, no, you can't, she's a woman. So that didn't personally strike me as like artificially tacked on to suit the current political climate. That struck me as like, this is genuinely a really, really interesting place historically to explore tension. And I hope they lean into that more, actually, personally.
I think the theme's good, but I agree that the dialogue in the particular scene with the mother was just clunky.
Yeah,
like it could have been done a bit better.
Yeah, I didn't feel that either, to be honest.
I thought it was very nice.
I didn't mind. I got to join with Patty on this. Maybe it was me glowing from the soundtrack of Game of Thrones in my ears.
How good was the soundtrack? Just
Yeah.
as an
I was like,
aside.
oh,
All of the
fuck
sound
yeah.
design was actually like spot on. It was
And just all the small
Because-
callbacks,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
motifs.
I was trying to pay a lot of attention to dialogue because unlike Game of Thrones, they didn't have a lot of George R.R. Martin dialogue to use, right? There's barely dialogue.
Correct.
in Fire and Blood.
Yeah.
And I kept waiting. So first of all, I recognized a lot of the lines because they used a lot of the lines, especially with Viserys, and Daemon, lines that were in Fire and Blood, but they had to make so much of it by themselves. So I was paying extra attention.
So sorry, Matan. Is there actual dialogue in Fire and Blood?
There is, but it's scarce. Think of the Bible, okay?
Right,
There will be moments when and David has said to God why but not much of it.
This was an important moment, so people remembered what that important figure said at that time.
Right,
but we don't have the
quoting.
natural dialogue in private moments unless
They have
Mushroom was eavesdropping on them. And we have to take Mushroom's word for it.
Yeah. And actually, I don't know if the dialogue, thinking about it, was as good as the dialogue in the first episode of Game of Thrones. And I guess that's because they don't have George R.R. Martin's incredible writing. Maybe that'll change.
Yeah.
I don't think the dialogue was bad, but
I thought it was
you don't have those
okay.
lines that are like,
okay.
wow, that's
Yeah.
a line.
And if there is a zinger,
Yeah.
it's probably this very sparse
Yes.
pickings we have from Fire and Blood. Yeah.
While we have the bomb thing going, I'd love to know what you guys, especially you, Ali, what do you think about the bird scene?
I'm going to circle around to that. I've kind of got an order because that's kind of that's a big centerpiece. Yeah. But just before we move on to from the betrayal of Rhaenyra, I'm going to stumble over that every time. So what I kind of love about her character and what I'm really excited for how she's going to be portrayed. And again, this idea that during the adaptation, you've got screenwriters and an actor who's going to make the definitive choice of who this person was. I think what makes Rhaenyra a very interesting and tragic character in Fire and Blood, and a great choice for protagonist, is the way Flood and I keep going to mess that up as well. Fire and Blood is told it's through 4 different male lenses. Very purposefully, she's only portrayed through, here are the 4 people who wrote primary sources at the time, and here's now the male historian drawing conclusions on her. So we never actually know who she is. She's only ever portrayed through this cloud of the historian's gaze, all these male gazes. And as a fun fact, I was just reading her wiki, and these are what she's kind of known as through history. She's initially known as the Realm's Delight, and I'm pretty sure they threw that into episode 1. I do recall hearing that, where someone's like, oh, there's Rhaenyra, the princess, the Realm's Delight. Later, she's known as the Whore of Dragonstone. Later, she's King Maegor with tits, the Half-Year Queen, Rhaenyra the Pretender, Queen Rhaenyra, the Dragon Queen, the Bitch Queen.
Oh, wow.
So it's this incredible gendered language gets attached to Rhaenyra and this lens, and that's how she's only ever known by everyone else. So
sounds about right.
Yeah, and that's as through history, that's our relationship with history. Martin's doing a great job there. So I just wanted to ask you guys your impressions of her as a character now that she's going to be solidified as a character as we get to engage with as an audience, rather than this kind of nebulous, tragic figure that she is at arm's length from Fire and Blood.
She didn't actually, to be honest, I didn't think she was a poor character, but she didn't strike me as, she didn't jump out to me. And maybe that's the actress. And again, I don't think there was anything wrong with the actress in her role, but she didn't like grab me as like, wow, now this is a character to watch. She was fine, but
that might be the point.
Yeah, no, I don't
so.
know if she's going to be the main character.
If you think about Sansa in episode 1 of Game of Thrones,
no, even Sansa, like, I don't know, she had something to maybe go like, well, that's an interesting character.
Everybody hated her.
Yeah, that's true.
You hated Sansa in episode.
Well, maybe. To be honest, I thought every actor was kind of overshadowed by Matt Smith, frankly. So, because I thought he was effing brilliant.
Let's talk about him.
We will circle the Matt
That's
Smith.
okay. So yeah, that was my impression.
Again, I don't want to bury the female protagonist as we phonetically talk about that was
That's too ironic.
Did any of you guys think like, wow, this is amazing protagonist?
I loved her. I absolutely loved her. Right. I thought, but that's the thing. I love her because I know what the character is destined to. And I'm like, oh yeah, she's going to do fine. She's going to be great for that. But I do understand there's another actress. Is that right?
We're about to get a time skip for episode 2.
Are we going to keep this one?
No, they get her and Alicent are about to get recast.
Because I really like it. That's interesting.
That's I liked the casting a lot. Like I thought they got someone. I like the look of the person. I like it wasn't. I don't know. She has really interesting like facial features and stuff, and I was like, oh, like I like this person. Like she feels like a different textured person that they got. Yeah, so I like the casting. Same as Patty, she didn't like jump out to me. If anything, I was like, she seems really cool, and I'm kind of in a way a little bit jealous of her just because I think she's cool. And
you want to be riding,
but as a result, I didn't feel like I needed to really like follow her. I'm like, she felt like the cool kid. Like anytime she came in, I was just like, oh, you're fine, like you're cool, like everyone, you're just the cool person, like everyone likes you.
I kind of agree with you, Patty. I found her a little underwhelming. But it is my intuition that that's almost the point of her character, is that she's sort of at this point almost like a dark horse that we're like, oh yeah, she's a protagonist, whatever. And I think the fact that she is remarkable now will lend a lot to her journey. Now, I don't know how good the actress is. I didn't really get a sense of what she can do or what she can't do. It seemed like it was all pretty underplayed. Again, the dialogue I think could have been workshopped a little more. I think maybe the fact that it is just a fairly blank slate at this point, and that's not a bad thing or a good thing, can maybe lend it to some more extremes later. So that was the impression I got.
Yeah, that's what I'm excited for. I think she's meant to be quite young in the book. And we're talking 7 years old. They've made her 16-ish is what we saw in episode 1. So they've had
classic YA protagonist age.
Yeah, but that's
Martin.
Martin writes them very young.
Sometimes he writes a scene and he describes this romantic, for lack of a better word, shagging, and then you flip back a few pages. Wasn't she 11? And okay,
different times, man.
I guess
different times.
He wrote it. She's 13, man.
But princesses were married off at 8 and stuff. It's not historically. I know I keep coming back to history, but that's what happened. It was a brutal time, and it was a different time, and So anytime that Martin does something like that, I'm like, okay, I buy that.
All right. I mean, we forgave him for the incest, so we might as well.
Yeah, that happened as well.
Let him get away with everything else.
This is all historically shit that happened, man.
Yeah, he just he does something and people get outraged, and then he's just like, just read the text. It's all
just holding up the mirror, man.
Exactly.
Kind of is. I find it refreshing, to be honest, when he does some really shocking stuff, because that is real. And I don't know why we shy away. Well, I do know why we shy away from that. But.
So I will move the topic on, but I am very excited for her arc, because it is going to be this excellent story that we have seen with Daenerys, that we have seen with Sansa Stark. It's kind of the innocent girl, I suppose, and what the world is about to do to her, and then what the character has to become to survive it. It's classic Game of Thrones. We know that trajectory, and we're excited to see it. And if you do Google fan art of Rhaenyra, it's very interesting, because she's not that typical warrior dragon queen that dialogue kind of hinted at. Kind of later in life, she, her detractors, similar to today's celebrity culture, she gets called frumpy, and she's the frumpy queen, and that people are that's not a sexy dragon rider warrior type. And again, she never quite fits the mold of what she's meant to be and supposed to be, and that's kind of refreshing. And I'm interested to see how they lean into that.
They probably won't. I think they'll make her.
Or do they still need their sexy Targaryen?
I think they will. Unfortunately, I would love it if they had a frumpy female lead, but I don't think that's going to happen. That's not how TV works.
I have to say, I think that George R.R. Martin is the master of appropriate diversification. He'll do it in a way that doesn't feel phoned in, doesn't feel inserted. It just feels natural. The way he will depict characters just all across the diversity spectrum. I just think it's a masterclass.
All right, so moving the conversation on to Matt Smith.
Was he in that?
What have they done?
Gotcha.
What have they done to my doctor? No, I'm so happy with him.
What do you mean?
I'm so happy with this guy.
Yeah, I thought he was fantastic.
I was terrified when they cast him. I was not toxic about it. I was like, oh, it's gonna suck. I was like, what? Okay, if you say so.
I want to have the 2-part reaction here, where Matan and I kind of talk about Daemon Targaryen, and then the 3 reactions of how you just came at him blank in this episode 1. Because I was similar, where it's kind of Daemon Targaryen. He's meant to be a warlord. Everyone keeps whispering he's the second Maegor. He's meant to be this terrifying, battle-hardened character, and then we get told that he's going to be played by Matt Smith. So what is your reaction when you hear that, Matan?
I just want to explain the timeline, because I knew Matt Smith is on the show, because I only recently read Fire and Blood. I just didn't know what character he is. And then I go on IMDb, I'm like, oh, I wonder who Matt Smith is. Damon?
Damon?
I didn't get it live. I didn't get it live like everybody else got it, because obviously I knew he's on the show when I got the book. I just had no idea. I'm like, okay, I guess he's going to do one of the Valerians or something. But no, he's Damon Targaryen, and he kicks ass. I loved him as the Doctor. Doctor Who, I thought was incredible. He was adorable, and
except when he was sometimes scary as the Doctor. He could also turn on Scary Doctor every now and again.
Yeah. And apparently it was on Morbius, but I didn't watch that.
So without the context of who Daemon Targaryen is meant to be, how did you guys come in fresh at watching Matt Smith walk around in a blonde wig?
I mean, I was pretty fresh coming out of seeing him in The Crown playing Prince Philip.
Yes.
I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, I get him as the authoritarian again. Yeah, I'm not going to say he like acted circles around everyone else on the screen, but really, there's no one that was like, well, yeah. First Game of Thrones,
so many great moments.
He did. We were so spoiled for amazing actors in the first Game of Thrones. They
kind of used all of England, so
they did.
You don't want to feel like you're getting second pickings with the House of the Dragon. There's actually quite a lot of Australians in it, so I actually think young Rhaenyra, who we unfortunately bashed slightly, I think she's an Australian actress, and Breakbones, who's coming up, is an Australian actor.
Breakbones.
Okay, just to conclude, I think Matt Smith is an actor. I agree with Patty. He didn't run circles around everybody, but I think he hit all the right beats of this guy that you're not quite sure as an audience. Am I supposed to not like him? He gave me this kind of late Jamie. I don't want to compare him to Jamie Lannister, but
I've got a Jamie Lannister rant, so feel free to begin.
That's the thing. He's like, he had that moment when his mistress tells him the king can't replace you, and a cliche character said, no, he can't, and I'll show it to him. But instead, he just lets her hug him. And he thinks about it, and he listens to her. And to me, that is such a great character moment, because it's just the opposite of what you'd expect. And even when he kind of schemes, he never makes any sign like, oh, I want to kill my brother. He never says that. He never gives that vibe, at least in the first episode. He's like, I love my brother. I want to be his hand. I want him to be his hair. I don't want to replace my brother. I want to help him. Maybe you don't believe him, but I really like that vibe as a character, because it makes him harder to read, harder to like or dislike. But
yes,
that's it.
A more believable villain as well, right? He's not just like he's got
is he the villain?
I mean, he cut a lot of people's hands off on the first step. I'm going to put my cards on yes, but you're right. We should wait.
I did like him a lot, and for that reason of like, you know, he's the one that like pops the or like I don't know what to say here, but breaks the seal on the Game of Thrones violence in this one. It's like, all right, when's it coming? And here's the scene for this guy. A lot of violence in your face. It's Game of Thrones. Look at these severed limbs. And then that's what I got from that scene. And then I was really happy with how that went from there, because it felt like a lot of here's violence, and then it got really like he got really interesting and was like I did really love when he was talking to his brother at the end. He's like, why won't you make me hand? I would protect you. And when he said that, I was like, ooh, I think he would actually like really save the king from his court. Like he would really hold him
or kill them.
And I don't think he would have. I think he would have filled that role really, and just really wanted to show that he could stand up and help his brothers stand up.
I think he would have protected the king by killing the court, but we'll see.
That's what I meant. Like,
and that could have been it. But I love those characters.
Yeah.
They love someone and the rest are dead.
Like this abusive relationship. Yeah, I'm making your family hate you for you because I love you.
Yeah, I thought Matt Smith was. I've loved him ever since he played the Doctor. I just saw that and I was like, wow. But first I saw him and I was like, wow, that's a really interesting face. I really like looking at that face.
Handsome in a weird way
to watch act. But no, he's great. And in this, I thought he really walks that line between. I think Jamie Lannister is a good comparison, but he's more complex. He's a bit more like he's jovial and he knows that he is beloved but also feared. But I think Matt Smith walked that line really well. I was really when I saw that it was him, I was like, oh, this motherfucker. Yeah. I know that I'm holding the explicity like fucking button for this episode. So feel good.
Jaime Lannister was going to be my go-to comparison, because if they stick the landing, Daemon Targaryen is going to be the House of the Dragons, Jaime Lannister, in terms of a really satisfying character arc as well. But the fun thing is he doesn't have that very sympathetic beat where very early on they cut off Jaime's hand. So as an audience, straight away you go, oh shit. And then that's the switch, right? When as you start sympathizing with him. Yep. Daemon Targaryen's not going to have such a very clear-cut moment of sympathy. It's all going to be in Matt Smith's hands to really juggle that complexity. So I'm very excited for Daemon Targaryen to be best pony of this season. And best pony, that's like a MLP reference. Anyway,
MLP?
MLP? Yeah.
What language are we speaking right
MLP.
now?
That's a My Little Pony reference?
It is.
Okay.
All right. That's why we used MLP.
I went
instead of
deep
saying
in
My
a
Little
different
Pony.
fandom for a second. So I think a good scene that really will demonstrate Daemon Targaryen's character here is the king for a day. And so when he kind of gets up to speak in the whorehouse, you don't actually hear him say those words. And therefore there's room to interpret that he didn't actually say that. I would say go back and watch the scene where the king confronts him again.
Yeah, I love that.
Because he's like, did you say that? And Daemon sits there for a moment, kind of knowing Otto Hightower potentially just made this shit up to make Daemon look bad. I think there's room for interpretation that Daemon didn't actually say that at all in the whorehouse. But rather than be like, I didn't say that, brother. He's not going to defend himself. He's not going to waste that energy. That. He's just like, look, there's people grieve in their own way. He sidesteps it because he knows Otto Hightower's a dick. I think he actually calls him a cunt in that scene. So Damon's very clear about, he's like, this is Otto Hightower in your ear being a shit.
Is Otto Hightower a dick?
He is, in my opinion.
He sent his daughter in her mother's dresses.
So they're playing,
the king.
Was that meant to be a sexual thing?
Oh yeah.
It was.
Oh, wear your mother's dresses?
Very implied.
Definitely.
Visit the king with a book?
That was definitely.
That's like the
right. Okay, that's
Netflix
interesting.
of chill.
So they're playing silly buggers with who the true villain's going to be, right? Because Daemon is so overtly like, he cut off all those people's things. While Otto gets to be like sensible, but it's like there's going to be a fun switcheroo coming, and I'm very looking forward to it. But yeah, basically, and also Daemon's introduction is the very sweet scene with Rhaenyra right before that really violent scene. So I love how that kind of goes boom, boom.
Well,
and you get that contrast.
He's on the throne.
He's presented on the
yeah,
exactly.
You can't overlook that. He's sitting on the Iron Throne.
He's sitting on his brother's throne. That's a Scar move. Scarf.
Yes, yes, it is.
It's a very
good catch, Matan. Good catch.
Though, if you were to ask me who's the most loyal Targaryen of the entire cast, I would vote for Daemon. Like when he says he would protect someone, he's not lying. He's not a liar. He cares about the
protect
family.
The shit out of him.
But he is a brutal despot. So,
if you want to be protected, you want Daemon in your corner. Holy shit. Anyway, I don't want to get into spoiler territory, but I think just keep your eyes on him because he's going to be so complex, and I'm very glad he's in Matt Smith's hands to handle that complexity, because if you just cast anyone who is like a huge warlord archetype, I don't know, it would be you'd struggle to read into all these small things he needs to do as a character.
I really like Matt Smith's aesthetic reflecting that arc, because Matt Smith he almost like, he feels like mongoosey, like snaky. He's like slender and like sharp in the eyes. Like he's really like, it's in his eyes. That's where his warlord is. And it's
like an animal cunning.
And his eyes and his nose, that Matt's,
and his chin.
Nose. I really thought for the first few scenes with him, I actually thought, because my mom's like, oh, that's Matt Smith. I'm like, oh, whoa. It's Matt Smith with like a nose prosthetic, or like I really thought they did something to his nose, but then I was like, oh no, that's just his nose. It's a beautiful nose. Matt Smith, if you're listening, it's a beautiful nose.
Lovely nose.
Matan, before, we might have to lose you soon. I was going to ask you your reaction, because you brought up the amazing intercut kind of birthing jousting scene. Did you have any thoughts?
Amazing isn't the word I'd use. So I was watching the episode on the bus on the way to work. And
what a way
the bus
to consume it.
Yeah, the bus was full. I had no choice because I work crazy.
You
hours.
must have known
the bus was
that Game of Thrones would have
No.
really
Look, I knew
shocking
the scene is
stuff,
coming.
right?
I knew the scene is coming, and I'm watching, and I'm making the most tortured faces on the bus while I'm watching. I'm literally turning the screen towards the window, so I'm only half watching it. Maybe it's me being a weak male, but I just cannot. I cannot, like, okay, one day I'm gonna have to be in that room and have my fingers crushed. But I just saw that, and I'm like, oh God, are they gonna please cut away? Please cut away, please cut away. I mean, don't literally cut away, just cut away from the scene. And I don't know. Let's put my reaction aside from it. As for a more objective way, let's look at that scene. They really literally tried to hit the nail on the head, right? That this is her battlefield. And we can laugh about it. We can say it's kind of cliche, but it's true. Women just did not survive these pregnancies, and her fear is very real when she's pregnant. And her saying to him, "I don't want to do this again," is not because she's spoiled. It's because this woman realized every time she's pregnant, it's a coin flip. Is she gonna come back from it? And if you read Fire and Blood, like half of the female deaths is during childbirth. Like, and a lot of them die in childbirth. Like, I'm guessing George R.R. Martin did his research.
Fun fact,
the numbers
actually,
are just
it's about 1 in 100, I think, historically, which is still very high.
No.
You're free to look that up, but I believe it's 1 in 100. I just listened to a podcast episode on childbirth and what are the women that called it? Anyway, I'm derailing this, but it's still a lot of people. But I think there's an understanding that it's higher than it is. Anyway,
okay, but yeah, as a scene of merit, they kind of showed the battlefield on both sides. I found the birth like 100 times harder to watch than the actual people getting slaughtered.
Totally.
But that's just me.
On that note, there's an excellent scene where they're doing like the blood and gore of the guy's head getting smashed in during kind of like the fight of satisfaction after the joust. And you watch that and you're desensitized and you're like, there's some Game of Thrones blood and gore of a cracked skull. And then it cuts to, I think it's Alicent is picking her nails. And everyone goes,
I remember that.
That was next level.
It's suddenly like the trauma. So it's like there's the stylized violence, but then there's the implied trauma that that it's having. And that I thought that was such a magnificent shot. Just the nail picking was the squeamish moment rather than the head getting
that set a tone. That was that set a dark tone really well. Like oh my gosh. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Any other thoughts?
I'm just gonna say before I have to dip, unfortunately. I did enjoy the first episode. I am quite looking forward to the next one, and I'm coming into this with a just blank. I'm trying to not have any previous feelings, thoughts. Like Ali said, it is a different team, and I think they do deserve us to give it a fair shot. That's it.
Excellent.
See you guys.
See you.
All right, we're losing Matan from the podcast, but
with regards to the, I'd like to talk about the king. I'm sorry, I'm really bad with the names. What's the king's name? Like it was Viserys, right? Yeah, it's Viserys. Yeah, I really liked his portrayal, just as this sort of almost scholar king. Like as we've discussed at the beginning, when the coronation with I'm trying to think when he was named heir, essentially, he had just had this very accepting sort of nature when he did it. But I think the thing that really brought it home to me was when Alicent goes into his chambers and you see that he's just got a big friggin' set of miniatures. He's just a big nerd. And I just thought that was so sweet.
Yeah. It was like a guy with a train set.
That is exactly what it is. He's just a guy with a train set, and he's just I don't. But at the same time, then he's had to make this choice between his wife and the child. Although they did kind of imply, look, she's going to die. You have to decide whether or not you want to pull the button.
Did they imply that? I actually didn't get the implication that the wife was going to die either way. I thought it was you are choosing your wife or the child, which for me actually was the much more interesting choice. If she was going to die either way, then that's not.
Well, I agree. That makes a more interesting choice he has to pick the child or the wife. But I do specifically remember him saying that there was something about it being like you can either choose between your child living or nobody living. I can't remember the
Yeah.
quote. But
I think that was a
okay.
persuasive argument, but he does later phrase it as "or leave it in the hands of the gods," which
Oh,
is
that's
Yeah.
true.
maybe
True,
the birth will be
true.
fine, but do you want to take that risk? Like that was
Yeah.
thrown
Yeah.
in as well. On Viserys, there are some very interesting adaptative choices to make him more human, and I did like the guy playing with his miniature Warhammer army. That was a cool scene because his pure purpose, I guess, in the book is to not be a very good king. He was just like, as an archetype, is meant to exist as the worst, not as good choice when against Rhaenyra's the queen that never was, and he's just meant to be like a little bit weak, a little bit fumbling. So when he is overshadowed by the domineering personality of his younger brother, he is able to be pushed around slightly by the council. That's
true.
So it is interesting that he does come across as likable because the archetype isn't necessarily likable.
Yeah, he definitely seemed likable to me. He seemed like a normal man doing the best that he could with what he'd been given. That's the impression that I got.
You know, at first I was actually a little disappointed by the character choice just because he didn't have that amazing gravitas. But as the episode wore on and I got to see who he was meant to be, and actually since this conversation, I'm thinking that, lack of gravitas is kind of the point. He's not a born king.
He fell into it because he happened to be male.
Yeah. Least bad.
Least bad.
This is a spoiler question. But this whole episode, spoilers, whatever. So the decision at the end that the king makes to name Rhaenyra the heir, which that was a really cool moment for me. I'm like, ooh, we're like flipping the script. Like the king is just saying, fuck it, we're doing it. Like you're the heir. Like I'm just doing it. Was that in the book? Was that meant to be sort of a very defining moment for that king character, being the fumbling, can be pushed around, can be overshadowed, and here he is just making a decision?
That's interesting. I have a lot to say about that one scene in particular. I'm going to save that for the end of this podcast. But for me, that's always just a decision of love, in that we've got a character who's not very good at playing the political game. So like he was trying to do what they said, being like, I'll wait for a male heir, that'll stop all this talk and potential war and me having to make an uncomfortable conversation with my brother. So for him, Rhaenyra is around. She's the cupbearer. She's informed. She knows how the politics works. And just at the end of the day, it's like, this is my firstborn child. I do genuinely love my daughter. So for me, when I'm looking back on that, I'm like, he makes the decision just because he loves her. It's not really like a tactful or a growing a spine moment, though. Now that you've said that, I kind of like that interpretation, though. That's kind of cool.
But also they I feel like one of the takeaways meant to get from the episode is that Damon would have been a brutal king. And I think obviously he loves his daughter and he thinks she's capable, but also it's like anyone but that guy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like it kind of was almost standing up to him, and like what you said, Alex, like this is kind of his moment to, if I'm going to do one good thing, it's to make sure the next heir is the right one.
Yeah. And I think everyone agrees except Damon that it should not be Damon.
Well, I don't know. Weren't there some council members that were actually like, well, Damon is clearly the correct role? So.
I think they're just because they're like, we can't upend tradition. Do you want another war?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe.
Yeah, I do.
But people like a strong man, right? Some people.
And he
Some
is
people
well
like a strong
liked. The point is meant to be
he gets shit done.
The gold cloaks, they're fierce, they're loyal to him, he's popular.
Sure.
Like
with the gold cloaks, when I first saw that, I was like, is this a Baratheon thing? Like, what's going on here? And then I was like, oh no.
As the city watch, he built.
Yeah, no, I got that after they described it. Like initially, I was like, are they being invaded? Like,
small aside though, super weird that Damon like overhears that conversation. Like,
The
what
action
looks
is so
like
great.
inbuilt spy holes into the small council. They kind of got to get those filled in.
They do, yeah.
Anyway, I want to close out on a point on what everyone thought of the second last scene. So it is the scene we're talking about where he names her heir. So my journey through this episode is I'm enjoying the shit out of it. I love it. I'm like, they're doing so well. It's so loyal to the books. And I even remember having a thought while I'm watching it, because I got to see it on the big screen. I got to see it in a cinema because I'm a fancy film person. I saw it at a red carpet event. And the whole time I'm thinking they're doing such a good job of kind of being subtle and not drawing attention to the fact that we've had 8 seasons of a previous show. There's no wink, wink, nudge, nudges. They're treating this as a separate thing. I'm very excited. And then we get this scene where they veer out of their way to invent some nonsense that's not in the books for what I can only guess is to justify a tie back to the original show. And my head's exploding and I'm like ready to throw down in the cinema.
So that's not in the books.
This idea like that there's a premonition that drives Aegon Targaryen called the Song of Ice and Fire that's about White Walkers in the North.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, what are you talking about? And this idea that a Targaryen must be on the throne to defeat this winter that's coming. I'm like,
in 200 years?
Yeah, it's a long prophecy. You know, they're looking forward to the future.
It stood out to me like such a sore thumb. So I wanted to ask if you guys had any weird knee-jerk reactions listening to that scene at all.
I feel like it felt a little... There was a lot of information coming at once. I mean, I hadn't read the book, so the idea that there was a prophecy, that didn't strike me as weird. It's Game of Thrones, it's magic, prophecies happen. Cool, okay, I was on board for that. But it was like, now listen here. Here is the exposition. Here is what's going to happen. Here is the name of the first book of Game of Thrones in dream form. That was like a lot at once, but I can imagine a world where that was handled a little better in the script and would have been fine. Mm-hmm. Interesting that it wasn't in the books. That's
Yeah. It's for me, it was seeing as I went in with my bar so low, and I expected them to lean into the you have this massive fan base, you have this whole show, like you could do so much fan service if you wanted to, sort of thing. Like you said, Ellie, they did a good job of not leaning into that too hard and stuff. So I guess seeing as my bar was so low, when he said that, I was just like, and here it is. Like that, it was just like I didn't really feel it. I was like, yes, Game of Thrones was a show we watched. Like it was like,
well done. Thank
all
you
the characters on the screen
very...
turn to the camera and say, "A Song of Ice and Fire."
Yeah,
it was very it's like in The Hobbit when they're like, they're talking to Legolas and he's like, I've just heard tell of a ranger and blah 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 that you should really check out. And it's just like, just so we can put the name Aragorn in the audience's heads, just so they could have that.
I was watching it with my girlfriend, and one of the things she said at the beginning is, I don't remember anything about Game of Thrones. Like, I'm really hoping there's not going to be too many callbacks and things. And they walked a really, really excellent rope. You're nodding away here, Ali, between enough subtle tiebacks and like little Easter eggs and things where you go like, oh, okay, there's a Baratheon there. And actually just like telling a new story that you don't really need. You don't have to have watched Game of Thrones to enjoy this. It was good. It was well done.
Yeah, no, I thought I was so happy with how subtle they were with that until this final scene.
Yeah.
And it's just for me, like the idea that if the Targaryens say this prophecy did exist, like it just would have changed history. And I feel like the point of the original series is the Starks are the only one taking the threat seriously and everyone else doesn't give a shit. If the Targaryens had a premonition that was driving their motive to even be in Westeros in the first place, to unite people against this threat, like if that was knowledge, why is it a secret?
Did he
they would have been more invested in the
8 generations later too, like this is not going to happen soon.
Why don't they take every winter as a threat? Like anyway, the logic falls down very, very quickly for me.
I can buy that it's a secret. I can buy that that's the kind of thing you'd want to keep that. Like, you don't want to tell people that like, in 200 years, the world's going to end. Maybe you do want to keep that just within the family.
We will have to keep our eye on that as a narrative thread, though, because they do have to also write in. They have to write in a reason for that secret to not make it to Daenerys. Like, it needs to end in the line somewhere. Like somewhere.
And maybe they're going to have it end with Rhaenyra. Like maybe it dies with Rhaenyra, because I'm just for me it makes her character less complex. If suddenly she's a protagonist driven by destiny and a premonition. When just be a character driven by, no, this is the thing I'm trying to protect, my inheritance. I'm the better ruler. That's why I'm going to fight for it. Like that is such a human, wonderful motive rather than our typical high fantasy motivation of I'm driven by a premonition to stop ice zombies. So I'm a little annoyed they've shoehorned in, and I think that's going to be handled clunkily, but God, I hope they don't spend too much time on it.
Maybe they'll just never mention it again.
God, I hope
It's just the other option.
Yeah, I hope she just is able to exist as a complex character without this motivating her, but we shall see. Any final thoughts before I wrap up our reaction episode to House of the Dragon?
I have one.
Yes.
Do you think, and listeners, you can play at home, do you think the dragons would, if you were going into this completely blank, have not seen Game of Thrones, have not read any of the books, do you think the dragons would have nearly the same effect if we didn't have the satisfaction of seeing how much of a powerhouse and a trump card dragons are in Game of Thrones? Because that really brings a lot of weight to the introduction of, we have 10 adult dragons in our military, and the fact that they said a lot by having the dragon fly over in the first scene and nobody on the ground even looked up. It's like, oh, they're very common here. That says a lot. But it says a lot because if you know what was the deal in Game of Thrones.
They really,
so that was one thing I was wondering.
Dragons as nukes. They really were we got dragons. We win. We have dragons. And I was like, okay,
That's the things we're at the English essay on, isn't it? That's dragons as nuclear weapons.
Yes. Yeah. No, it is very interesting because it is happening in the shadow of Balerion the Dread has just died.
Yeah.
And that's meant to be the nuke. That dragon is the big dragon. So now they've all got their smaller dragons are all spread around the wider family. And that's if Balerion was still alive, you can kind of see how the story that's about to unfold wouldn't have unfolded. But because they've only got their smaller adult dragons on both sides of the family.
Phoenix, I actually think slightly the opposite. I don't know because I haven't seen it the other way around, but I think almost I have a little bit of dragon fatigue. Seeing so much of the dragons in Game of Thrones maybe go, okay, cool, dragons. Whereas if I just oh my God, there's dragons in this, I think they might have had more impact. But it's impossible to say.
House of the Dragons, in fairness.
I do appreciate what you're saying, Phoenix.
Okay. That's a good point.
Yeah.
We know what a dragon can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
And you watch them grow up with Daenerys. But anyway, they kind of cover it by saying the whole the one of our power, some of the power we hold over the world is that the world thinks we control the dragons, but in reality we don't.
Yeah,
that shows moment. They do give the fact that dragons are this big force. They paint that.
I've got opinions about that line as well. I'll keep it brief, but the idea, I feel like they spoke the subtext with that line. The subtext should be, if another family had the dragons, the Targaryens are just human personalities, but they're in charge because they happen to control them. But I don't know, as a book reader, I feel like it's really important that the Targaryens are actually a little bit magic. They do have the magic in their bloodline that only... Yeah. They're the only ones who can be dragon riders, and even then only some Targaryens are worthy enough to ride dragons. The book is full of just Targaryens who have been eaten by dragons across the centuries because they're not worthy to be dragon riders. And that hint of magic that was seeded into episode 1, that Viserys is sitting on the throne and the throne has cut him, and now he has all these oozing sores.
I remember that,
only a worthy person can sit on the Iron Throne, and that's a very subtle kind of magic we need to pay attention to.
True.
So I did enjoy they seeded that in, but we can't overlook the fact that Targaryens they are literally magic. That's why they are the rulers.
They look like elves.
This is the whole mushroom thing. Did the king really say that? Maybe he didn't actually have the premonition about those ice zombies. It's all hearsay.
I thought it raised the stakes, actually. When we heard that, you know what, between you and me, we don't have control. I was like, oh, damn. For me, that was, it made dragons much more scary. And the whole thing, much more, things could go south at any moment. But I haven't read the books, so... Yeah.
It's an interesting adaptation choice, and I do love how you watch it and you're like, no, that's a cool creative choice. While I'm sitting here as one of these book nerds who's outraged just because it's different.
Tells a different kind of story.
Anyway, thank you so much for joining us for this reaction episode. I'm pretty sure we've gone over our hour. Patty and Alex, I wanted to throw it over to you for a little bit of spruiking our own shit to kind of
Alex, you can
end
kick
the
this
episode.
I will. Hang on, just give me 1 second. I think I brought it up. No, I might not have, because I don't think I've been on a podcast since, but I just put out this book. It's called Golden Hour, and it is a collection of short stories. It's quite small. It's about 20,000 words, which equals about like 80 pages or something. But yeah, I have been writing these over the last couple of years, and I've just put it out. You can find it at my website, which is www.areldridge.com. And there's the link to the books there, paperback or ebook. It's in Kindle as well. So yeah, there's that. Also, you can find me on TikTok at AREldridge author. So.
And it's available on Amazon.
It is available on Amazon, yes.
Very
Check
cool.
it out.
There are some excellent stories in there. I've read some of them, and I can attest that they are very spooky horror. It's excellent.
Thank you.
I'm going to spook Metropius, which is going to be a feature film soon, Ali. Is that right?
Well, yeah, no, it looks like on the down low I've got the commission December, January to write the feacher script
Holy
for.
crap.
So
Holy crap, you got it.
It's in the pipeline.
Metropius is a diesel
my
punk,
gosh.
a diesel punk. What would you say? Thriller set in an unspecified time, perhaps in the future, full of intrigue and political machinations. And who is the real villain? And I've got the T-shirt on right now. You can see like this
There it is.
fantastic art.
We've got T-shirts.
It's, I
Oh my
mean, no one
gosh.
who's listening to this will be able to see, but just imagine a fantastic kind of stormtrooper looking dude. It's a graphic novel. It's a short animated film. It's amazing. Ali is the writer. We're all very proud of her. And check it out. Metropius is
Wow.
really cool.
Thank you for the shout out, Patty.
Congratulations.
Australia-
That's amazing you got the feature.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, like obviously they've still got to secure the funding to make it, but they're confident enough that they want a script. They've greenlit the script, so gonna write the feature script for it, and that's the direction. And yeah, across the year we'll be putting out. So issue 1 of the comics out now. We'll be doing 2, 3, 4, and then compiling it into a graphic novel with like art from the animation behind the scenes art. So it's going to be a nice little coffee table piece graphic novel.
The art is beautiful as well. It's really,
It is
really
very
nicely
beautiful.
drawn.
So that one's called Metropius, if
Metropius.
anyone's Googling that one. But yes, thank you so much for joining us, Phoenix, Patty, Alex. This has been a special one-off reaction episode of Pros and Cons. And we'll see you all again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
You're listening to Pros and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast.